Welcome back to Baggy TV. Welcome back to my stream. How you all doing? I hope you guys are doing well. Lads, firstly, I want to start by apologizing because I had the stream scheduled for 8 p.m. Middle Eastern time, not 8 p.m. UK time. That's who I am. I'm in the Middle East. Therefore, I scheduled it by mistake to 8 p.m. my time, not your time. So some of you guys came in early, and for that, I apologize, but we are on schedule as per Twitter and as per Instagram, 8 p.m. UK time. Guys, today I have with me a journalist by the name of Rob. Rob is also the editor of the Chelsea show. The Chelsea Socials. Hopefully, we're going to have a good debate with Rob and a good discussion in regards to some of the latest transfer news, both coming in and going out of the club. And we're going to have a quick discussion about social media and Chelsea social media specifically. So I want to start by saying welcome to stream, Rob. How are you doing, my man?
I'm good, thank you, my man. Thank you very much for inviting me on. Pleasure to always be on, talk about the best football club in London and the best football club in Europe now.
Champions of Europe, as it is. I see a lot of new names in the stream. I guess, Rob, you brought an entourage of you, mate.
Something like that. What can I say? The people love me.
Brilliant. Rob, today we're going to be talking about transfers. I want to start by talking about some of the big names that we've been seeing on the in the media. Achraf Hakimi and Erling Haaland. Today it's been all about Achraf Hakimi. Yesterday was all about Erling Haaland.
Yeah.
So let's kick off with Achraf Hakimi. Can you give us an insight to where we are right now?
Yeah. So the latest with Achraf Hakimi has been a long-term club target. The club did try and set up a deal for him a few years ago. However, they called it off because of the developments of Reece James and Tariq Lamptey. And as we all know, Reece James has gone on, success, been a great success. Tariq Lamptey's obviously left and done well elsewhere. But the club have always kept Achraf Hakimi in their sort of mind. And there's always been a bit of a feeling that at some point, the club, if he became available, might look at him. They see him as a long-term option on the right-hand side, probably to replace Azpilicueta and to challenge Reece James. He's also liked because he can play on the wing. Another similar player the club looked at in this situation was Youssef Attal at Nice. And again, they got very close to signing Youssef Attal, but again, a knee injury scuppered it. I don't necessarily think there was a plan to sign Achraf Hakimi this summer. However, with Inter Milan's financial situation, there's a chance to really take advantage of it because financially Inter are in a really bad place. And I think Chelsea are, quietly confident they can get something done. The main competition is Paris Saint-Germain, although I've been told PSG are a bit concerned about the fact the player would be playing at the AFCON. And also, he's not a choice for Mauricio Pochettino at all. Pochettino doesn't want to be playing a 5-at-the-back system, which is sort of where Hakimi really has mainly played the most in a 3-4-3 stroke 5-2-3. And I think, Paris Saint-Germain may well step away if Chelsea start really solidifying their interest. Certainly, the player is happy at Inter Milan, from what I'm told, Inter sources. However, at the same time, he's not against a move to London. And I think, Inter Milan need to sell a big-ticket player. They're keen, clearly, to keep Romelu Lukaku, keen to keep Lautaro Martinez, Nicolo Barella's off the table. So it's starting to look at the players they can get a lot of money for. I will also say that there were discussions, that some of the initial discussions with Hakimi started off as pure player swaps. Chelsea rejected the first offer because Inter were really keen on using N'Golo Conte in a deal. And this goes back to earlier in the year. And Chelsea flat out, just said Conte's not being used any. Chelsea don't really want to do much horse trading. They don't like doing player trades unless it really, really suits them. What
about the reports about Christensen being involved in this trade? Is that possible?
Christensen is someone who Inter Milan really like. Interest dates back to when Conte was there, and he's someone who I do feel would do really well in Serie A due to the nature of the player. However, from all the things I've been told from the Chelsea side, he wants to sign a new deal. He's very happy at the club. He, especially I think we'd agree, really excelled and came of age in the Champions League campaign and in sort of, the last 6 months. And ultimately, although there's, a contract running down, I think you're more likely to see extensions for himself and, say, Tony Rudiger than you are for sort of other members of the squad.
Okay. What do you think can Ziyech play as a role in bringing Hakimi? I mean, we saw Rudiger play a big role in Timo Werner and Havertz last season. Do you reckon Ziyech has a role in that? Could he actually play a role in that?
It's difficult. I mean, there's been rumours of Ziyech wanting to leave, and I've been told by someone who I have no reason to doubt that he's not necessarily settled very well in England. It's been a very difficult year for a lot of players to come in and settle, and due to sort of COVID. And I think at times, Ziyech, out of the big ticket transfers, shall we say, I think Timo Werner's had quite a lot of sort of support from Thomas Tuchel. Kai Havertz has now obviously got the Champions League final winning goal, and sort of Thiago Silva, Ben Chilwell and Edouard Mendy have all been very good signings, whereas Ziyech, I think, has struggled a little bit. And, considering the player that he's sort of been brought in to be, I think it'd be fair to say he's not lived up to the expectation. Do I think that's necessarily his fault? Not at all. But ultimately, it does sort of feel that Ziyech is... If Hakimi came in, I think it would help Ziyech settle in dramatically. Yeah. But at the same time, I can't help but also feel that Hakimi coming in may be an option to replace Ziyech on the wing. Because if Chelsea do want to switch and stay with the 3-4-3, it's hard to really see where Ziyech fits in that fluid 3-4-3 when they like the fast attackers. And indeed, if they're playing 4-2-4, it's hard to see where Ziyech fits in a 4-2-4. There's certainly interest in the player from clubs in Spain and clubs in Italy. So it's probably one I'd say to watch. I think at this moment in time, he's probably more likely to leave than to stay, if I'm honest. Okay.
Fair comment. In regards to the offer that we've made for Hakimi, it was reported that we've made a 60 million euro bid for the man, which is on par to what Paris Saint-Germain has made. Apparently, both have been rejected. Can you see Chelsea go closer to the asking price of 80 million, which is what Inter Milan is asking for, or do you think we will probably settle in for maybe 70 million, something in that ballpark area?
So the people who know me well will know I detest talk about football finances because they're such a complex thing. But as a special treat, as there's so many people here, Inter Milan have requested either 60 million euros up front in a single payment or 80 million in spread payments. At the moment, Chelsea are offering, and PSG for that matter, have offered deals that are in multiple parts. If Chelsea changed it and said, actually, we'll put 60 million up front, I think the Inter's tune may change. Otherwise, I think they'll continue to look for the higher fee. The other thing is also looking at players to be involved in the deal. I think Chelsea will try, and it won't be necessarily a straight swap, but it will be in a separate deal, but it may be, discounts, etc. They will try and involve Emerson in the deal because they know Inter Milan have long-standing interest in the player. Yeah. There's a lot of, he's well regarded in Italy for being, his position as an Italian national in the national team, and he needs to be playing regular minutes at his age. Let's be honest, it's not good for the player, it's not good for the club. The value is stalling. Someone asked if we tried to offload Alonso instead of Emerson, or is it that the player doesn't want to? Chelsea have not offered Marcos Alonso at this moment in time in this deal. We'll discuss Marcos Alonso Inter. A lot of Inter's interest in Marcos Alonso is being driven by Antonio Conte. And with Conte going, it's sort of, the Emerson interest predates Antonio Conte. So that's probably something, you sort of can understand why they continue looking. They would, as we've already said, like Christensen, but Chelsea sort of said no. From PSG's side of things, the player they really want is Leandro Paredes. And is the player who Inter would really like. But again, they want to take him in a separate cash deal because they want to move other players on and build the squad. So I think, if I'm honest, I think Chelsea will probably go back in with another offer. And I think they could, be quietly confident about getting this one done. I think Hakimi is, as I've sort of said, a unexpected opportunity this summer, but one that where, Chelsea is a cash-rich club and PSG is a cash-rich club as well, are going to be looking to take advantage of it. And Chelsea's, with the status as champions of Europe, with the very settled squad at this moment in time, and with the fact that they're looking at, big ticket players. I detest the phrase marquee signing, but, in this case, it will be a marquee signing. It sort of sits in that they're looking to bring in quality rather than quantity, I think, this summer at Chelsea.
Okay. What would you classify Hakimi as? Is he a Tuchel target or a Chelsea Football Club target?
Both. Thomas Tuchel really likes the player. He tried, when PSG first had interest in him, their interest first stems back to Tuchel being at the club. And they were one of the main reasons Tuchel ended up falling out with PSG was last summer. He wanted a right back brought in and wanted Achraf Hakimi brought in to Paris Saint-Germain last summer, and PSG's money with Leonardo magically went somewhere last summer, and they ended up bringing Florenzi on loan, who he didn't want. And that led to, the complete breakdown of all of it. But yeah, in this case, it's sort of like the club have liked the player for a long time, but at the same time, Thomas Tuchel has, greenlit the target. So it is something where they're both singing through the same hymn sheet.
All right, sweet. Well, that's some good stuff regarding Hakimi, man. That's some good stuff. I wanna go to the next big name on the transfer in list, Erling Haaland. What do you know about that, man? Tell me what you know about Erling Haaland.
So Erling Haaland, Chelsea, as I said to someone a few weeks ago, and as I said privately a few weeks ago, Chelsea, after winning the Champions League, like in 2012, want to do something spectacular this summer because they know they're in a really unique position this summer. They've got they're cash rich. They have got a clear list of targets. They've just won the Champions League, but they know the squad isn't perfect. At the same time, there's a number of players they want to move on and try and, bring in sensible finances for them. I think Chelsea have always had Erling Haaland at the top of the list, and that's why they started earlier this year and sort of last year rebuilding the relationship with Mino Raiola. It started off because in January there was initial discussions about Gianluigi Donnarumma coming in as a free transfer to the club, but the club stepped back from that because the wages are obscene. Edouard Mendy's doing a really, really good job in goal, and there's the Donnarumma wages are absolutely obscene. That's why Paris Saint-Germain have now become the only club that will match them, which is why he's going to end up at Paris Saint-Germain. But Chelsea started working on the relationship with Mino Raiola because they wanted to be in a situation where if the player became available, they could do something. Now, in terms of other clubs being interested, Real Madrid have a real interest in the player, but again, their main target this summer is Kylian Mbappe. If the Mbappe deal does, completely fall through, I think they will continue trying to get him, and until he signs a new deal, I think, they will, Operation Mbappe will be the key prerogative for them. If that does fall through, I think they will then start pushing hard for Erling Haaland. Barcelona would like to take the player next summer, but again, I don't think it's going to last until next summer. Mino Raiola has privately told Borussia Dortmund if it goes till next summer, he'll do everything to manoeuvre him to Bayern Munich, because Bayern Munich have said they'll meet the agency payments and they will need a long-term replacement for Robert Lewandowski. So that sort of leaves Chelsea and Manchester City and Manchester United. Manchester United's interest in the player is long-term, but they had a chance to get him a couple of years ago and completely, scoffed up the deal. And again, those who are regular listeners to me will know my thoughts on the Manchester United board and the way they operate. But Erling Haaland, could very easily be playing in Manchester United colours if it wasn't for ineptitude at the club. I think, Cavani signing a new deal, the fact they've still got Martial, they've got Rashford, they've got Greenwood. I think, this summer it's unlikely they would even, think about it. And their target is clearly Jadon Sancho if they're looking at a Dortmund player. Manchester City have more of a clearly defined interest in Harry Kane. They know the player wants them. Privately, I have no doubt Kyle Walker will have spoken to Harry Kane, even though he's not, legally meant to. I'm not going to pretend players don't talk to each other. I'm not going to pretend last year that Ben Chilwell hadn't spoken to Mason Mount about joining Chelsea before he joined Chelsea. And I think, you look at these sort of this sort of situation again, it's coming out as a place where Chelsea is suddenly emerging as the prime candidate. Now, the interesting thing in the last couple of days is that Erling Haaland himself has made it. Previously, he wasn't as keen on the Chelsea move. In the last couple of days, It's become quite clear now that the Chelsea move represents an interesting opportunity to him. And I've been told by people that, again, I have no reason to doubt that they have done. That they've, sold the package to him, that he can come in and sort of be the big ticket star along with Kai Havertz and Mason Mount, the big stars of the future, sort of build a team of almost, young world-class players, the renowned stars from each nation. If you have Havertz from Germany, you have Haaland from Norway, you have Mount from sort of England, and Reece James as well from England, Billy Gilmore from Scotland, and other names of Christian Pulisic as well from the USA. And sort of build a squad that can do something really spectacular for a couple of years. Crucially, the other thing that sort of I think will sell Chelsea in good stead is I don't think, and they did this with Eden Hazard, and I think they'll probably do it again here, is that they won't stand in the player's way in the future if a transfer to Real Madrid or indeed maybe to Barcelona became available. Because Chelsea ultimately will know if they bring him out, am I reliable? Well, Ange, make up your mind yourself, mate. I think they will, make up their Chelsea will look to try and do something. He will be very, very expensive this summer. It will be, significant wages, but at the same time, Chelsea, as I said, want to do something spectacular. And I think, they will certainly try. They will certainly push. It's something Roman himself, I think, will spearhead. This is a target I think Tuchel likes, but it mainly is a board target and mainly is a Roman sort of ambition target this time round.
Yeah, lads in the chat, listen, once I get through the questions that I have listed, I will give you all a chance to ask Rob whatever you want to ask him. And Rob is reliable. He ain't going to tell you anything unless he's quite sure of it, believe me. So, Rob, you mentioned something about the contract and how expensive it's going to be. Do you see that? Do you see the should the Erling Haaland deal go through? And I know there's different scenarios of how Chelsea will fund this, whether he will buy him and send him back alone for a season, etc., etc. There's a lot of different scenarios. But let's just look at Erling Haaland at Chelsea Football Club with a massive fat contract. Do you see that contract having repercussions on the dressing room with regards to other players? Do you think Chelsea could, in theory, have that contract done behind closed doors and not announce the contract to the public? I mean, how could they work that? I mean, from your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because ultimately top players are always going to want top wages. And as I've said before, I don't like discussing football finances because there's so much that so much goes unsaid. When you look at things like contracts, you can have players on low amounts of wages that have huge bonuses. You can have players on high wages with low bonuses. You can have high appearance fees. You can have all sorts of things that meld into it that put the money up. And when you see figures reported, one of my favorite things always to do is say, is that pre-tax? Is that post-tax? What other payments are involved in this? Does this include agency payments? Does it include appearance, right? Image fees. I'm told by people, again, that I've got no reason to doubt that he's very popular in the Dortmund dressing room. Erling Haaland doesn't, take himself too seriously. He recognises as a top player. He trains very well, but at the same time, he's got, quite a good attitude in many ways. He's not pretentious or precocious. In terms of salaries, I think footballer salaries are obscene anyway. So I find it very hard to discuss them, in sensible sort of terms. When you're saying, someone getting £300,000 a week might upset someone only getting £250,000 a week. But I think, Chelsea will be aware of that and they will manage it. I think crucially at this moment in time, there aren't many players in the squad that are huge egos. Previously, Chelsea have had huge egos at the club. And I think if they, maybe saw someone come in, that could have put them out of kilt. However, if it's at this moment in time with the nature of how the squad is sort of filmed and sort of formed up, there are a lot of players that are, going to be expecting, I think, wage rises anyway in the next year or so, and will get new contracts in the next year or so because the club want to build and keep building around that squad. So I don't think it really is going to be a huge cause for concern. Obviously, you never really know until the player comes in. But then I suppose you look at the opportunity cost. Do you accept maybe one or two players becoming unsettled if you bring a player in that scores you 35 plus goals and wins you the Premier League title?
Bob, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I'm having audio issues. Just give me 1 second. I'm trying to fix them. I'm not sure if you can hear me. If you can hear me, Rajan, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Give me 1 second, Bob. I'm having audio issues.
No problem. In the meantime, I'll have a look at some of the questions and give them some responses. So someone asking me, does Donnarumma fit the profile of the goalkeeper Tuchel would want at Chelsea? I think Thomas Tuchel's very happy with Edouard Mendy. I have no reason to doubt he isn't sort of happy with the player. Ultimately, if Chelsea had wanted to pursue an offer for Gianluigi Donnarumma, they had the window available to do it. And again, as I've said, they stepped back because of the wages. The player, despite the story of him going to PSG, I can't see him wanting to be second choice at PSG. I can cause that causing an issue very quickly. And I think the one who's going to lose out is probably Keylor Navas. Even though he's just signed a new deal, I can very easily see Navas suddenly ending up on the bench or maybe getting cup games while sort of Donnarumma plays sort of the league games. Again, it's terrible to see how Navas gets treated at every club because he always gets the same sort of, short shrift in many ways. Aurélien Chouameni, So one of many central defensive midfield names that have cropped up to be linked with Chelsea, Aurélien Tchouaméni has had a very good season at Monaco, comprising, I think, of him winning the Ligue 1 Young Player of the Year award. Now, Monaco themselves at this moment in time don't want to sell the player. They are hoping that the fact that they did qualify for the Champions League will make them cash rich enough. If they hadn't qualified, it would have been much more simple. They know that the player is only going to increase in value. At this moment in time, there are loads of clubs that retain interest in him. Chelsea, Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, Juventus have had a look at the player. There are other clubs as well that I think are probably on the periphery more and more, but have watched him a little bit, the likes of your Arsenal and Tottenham, that have gone and scouted the player. Now, I think Chelsea are probably in a position, if they want to make a deal happen for Aurélien Tchouaméni this summer. However, Monaco are less keen. I think they will try and bump up the price where possible. So it's whether Chelsea are happy to pay whatever fee Monaco want. Again, they have other names in the CDM sort of target in mind. I think a deal for Tchouaméni is possible. However, it's something that is unlikely to sort of, something that's unlikely to happen in the short term, i.e. this month or in sort of next month. It will be later in the window if Chelsea do sort of, bring in Aurélien Tchouaméni.
What about this Adama Traoré story? Any news on that?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, the Adama Traoré story, a lot of it seems to be peddled from his agent. His agent has claimed that, all sorts of clubs have looked at the player and are interested in the player. And frequently, he gets out in the press that Liverpool, Barcelona, Chelsea have looked at him. Wolves would be happy to sell if they got a substantial offer, but I don't think anyone will match that, the valuation for the player. He's not had a particularly good season. And, it's one of the situations where I think this is more of a case of an agent using our name than anything. I think he's probably maybe one of those options that might be further down the wing-back list, but it's, unlikely to sort of come into play, if I'm all honest. I think, from my personal opinion, if Chelsea are going to look at Adama Traoré, they'd be better off looking at Tino Livramento and promoting Livramento to the sort of as a sort of option on the right wing-back / right wing position. If they're bringing in, Hakimi, I can understand why he's brought in as a definitive sort of starting option, whereas Traoré to me doesn't, he's not good enough to be that.
Yeah. I lost audio for a little bit there, but I'm not sure. Did you address Declan Rice situation yet, or?
I haven't addressed Declan Rice now. I covered Aurélien Tchouaméni.
Okay. I mean, Declan Rice is one of those stories that has been around for some time, especially with the Lampard interest in the lad. Where do we stand on this? I mean, is there any legs to the story of him coming to Chelsea, or is it something that was something that left with Lampard, basically?
So a lot of Chelsea's interest was driven by Frank Lampard in the player, and last summer there was an option to make a deal happen, but it ultimately fell through because the costs were very, very high. West Ham themselves weren't happy at the way Chelsea were approaching the transfer. They weren't happy at the pretty public, coveting of the player, and also they were less inclined to discuss a deal while Lampard was at the club, because they, people at West Ham's hierarchy still remember Frank Lampard and sort of his own situation at Chelsea, where he came in sort of what was seemed to be a good fee, and then afterwards it ended up, looking like pittance and ended up reflecting quite badly on them. With currently, there is still interest in Declan Rice. The player is very, very expensive and will be very, very expensive, especially for Chelsea, because I think they'll add a premium on to negotiate with Chelsea. West Ham don't want to sell the player, but a big offer could make them change their mind. Manchester City and Manchester United both also really like the player. To be honest, it really wouldn't surprise me if Manchester City did make a bid for him. And I've said this to a couple of people. It really wouldn't shock me if Manchester City did come in, even with Fernandinho signing a new deal. They do have other names in that position. Again, Aurélien Tchouaméni and Boubacar Kamara, both in that position. But I think they will probably instead, look towards a big ticket deal for Declan Rice. I think if Chelsea see a club making a bid, then they might well match it. And then it comes down to what Declan Rice sort of wants.
Sure. Lads in the chat, I'm going to be addressing the players leaving in a minute. I want to talk about players coming in. but we will be addressing players leaving. I just saw a comment by DJ Saab regarding Callum Hudson-Odoi. We'll be talking about him in just a sec. I want to just address this comment. I know Varane was linked with Chelsea a few weeks back. I think Sule from Bayern, and even Boateng and others. Where do we stand on the centre-back situation? Is there any developments there?
So in centre-back, Chelsea have a very difficult situation at the minute in centre-back, because previously under Frank Lampard, it looked quite clear in the January window that Rudiger and Christensen would either be on their way out in January or in the summer, and Chelsea were going to give Kurt Zouma a new deal and try and bring someone in, probably Mark Guehi, to play alongside him. However, with the resurgence and renaissance of Christensen and Rudiger, both of them are now likely to get a new deal, and so suddenly Kurt Zouma is looking like the one most likely to exit. Chelsea value the player at quite a significant amount of money, and he doesn't have, a short term left on his contract. So I think it's 2023, so it's not that short. I think, there's interest in the player from Everton that I think will probably leave with Carlo Ancelotti going. There is real interest in him from Roma, which I think is probably being driven by Jose Mourinho. He's already once tried to bring him to Spurs and tried to bring him to Manchester United. Paris Saint-Germain see him as an option as a squad player, but again, I don't think he's keen on that sort of move. So I think Zouma probably is the one who's most likely to move on at the moment, but the club aren't actively trying to do it. At the same time, they've got the difficult situations that they've got Mark Guehi, who's a very good young centre-back who wants assurances on minutes, and there's interest in the Premier League from Southampton, Crystal Palace, Norwich, on all taking him on either a loan or indeed a permanent deal. So the club have got to make a decision with that. They've got the very talented young Xavier Mbayamba and Levi Colwill as well, who will want to see their pathways not being blocked. In terms of centre-backs coming in, Chelsea have three main names that Thomas Tuchel specifically mentioned to the club, which are Nicolas Sola, Jules Koundé and Raphael Varane. So Nicolas Sola is available from Bayern Munich this summer. He's available for a sensible fee for what the player is. Tuchel likes him and thinks that he's been treated badly at Bayern. He's had a poor injury record, to be fair, and has struggled for form. But there is clearly a very good player in there. He's still not very old, and the deal could be done quite easily. I think this is one where Chelsea will be hedging their bets a little bit and seeing what happens in other positions, what happens with players in and out before moving for him. Jules Koundé, Thomas Tuchel really likes the player. However, Chelsea, when scouting him, were concerned about his height and lack of physicality for the Premier League. And they sort of told Tuchel as much. I think that Tuchel may try and change Chelsea's mind in this regard and may try and put an offer forward for Jules Koundé. Certainly, Real Madrid are really, really keen on the player. And I think, they will, with Sergio Ramos leaving, or most likely to leave, they will probably do what they just did in 2007 and just buy Sevilla's best centre-back again, because they have no originality whatsoever. But I think they will probably, look to bring him in. They've already brought in David Alaba as one centre-back because they expect to lose 2, possibly 3 this summer, Real Madrid. And they're also looking at another youngster who, the name's not important at this moment in time. And then the final name in the centre-back position is Raphael Varane. He is keen on a new challenge. Certainly, his relationship towards Zidane had become strained towards the end of Zidane's run. Yes, I do have a bit of a bedhead. Thank you, Barry. But his relationship became strained a little bit towards the end. And Varane certainly made it known through his agent that he was available. Chelsea and Manchester United both have a watching brief. Again, the fee is not insignificant. Paris Saint-Germain have an interest in bringing in a high-profile French player to the club, especially if they lose Kylian Mbappe. And so looking at Raphael Varane might, come into their thoughts as well. I would say at this moment in time, I think centre-backs are lower priority for Chelsea than sorting out the striker position, defensive midfield and the wing-back position. But certainly don't rule it.
Yeah. Chumani, Hakimi and Haaland are the 3 most realistic transfers this window.
I don't like saying realistic. I think if Chelsea had a choice, their 3 to come in would be Hakimi, Haaland, and then Declan Rice. However, I don't necessarily think that all 3 of them will be attainable in the window. It's possible they may be. Financially, I think Chelsea could make something happen because of the amount of players they have that could go out and the options of on players, if they potentially are going to sell the likes of Tammy Abraham, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Kurt Zouma, that have all sort of been linked with ways out, suddenly that's 100 million sort of pounds that you could get quite quickly. So Emerson again, 50 million. You can see where the money's going to start to develop. Chelsea are also cash rich from not being too badly affected by COVID, and of course had the very good run in Europe to get them sort of cash. So yeah, I think that's probably the three Chelsea would like to do. Whether they can do it is another matter. And in the striker position, certainly, I think Erling Haaland, as I've said, will be very, very, very expensive.
Yeah. It's going to be what's the word here? FIFA career mode transfer window for Chelsea again. Abramovic enjoys playing FIFA, by the way, so I think we'll just have to wait and see. Listen, there's a list. There's a list that I've compiled here. I'm going to give you the list. I know we've covered some of these names already. I'm going to give you this list, and this is what I want you to address in regards to players leaving. Yeah. Now, we've talked about the players who are on the fringes, who could be out on loan, who could be being sold, and this is a topic that we've talked about on a lot of streams, a lot of videos, all across the social media. But there are players that have become more apparently on the way out, and this is because of where we are as a club, where we're moving to. Now, the players that have been mentioned recently is Christensen, part exchange, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Munich interest, Emerson Palmieri, part exchange, maybe Napoli, maybe Inter, Ziyech, unsettled, Olivier Giroud, contract expired, extended due to a clause in the contract. Tammy Abraham, a player who hasn't been given a lot of playing time and doesn't seem to be one of Tuchel's favourite players. And also, Ruben Loftus-Cheek with Sarri apparently is interested in getting him over to Lazio. So these are the players that are mainly first-team players. Some are out on loan. But I want to know your insight in respect to the situation in regards to these players.
Okay, so what I think will be easiest if I'll start off with the ones where I've got the most definitive sort of insight and first insight, and then move on. So Ruben Loftus-Cheek had basically treated this season as a bit of a reset to try and get back to full fitness, not get injured again, and work on his bodily fitness. He wants to come back to Chelsea in pre-season and show what he can do, and he still feels there's a place for him at Chelsea. However, I think certainly internally the club have a feeling that if the right offer came on the table, they would be happy to move the player on. Again, it's just due to a situation that very good when he came through, but the injuries have been an issue, and now he's been replaced by Mason Mount sort of in the squad as one. Kai Havertz is another option in a similar sort of vein, and they've got youngsters coming through like Tino Andran and Charlie Webster that are still coming through on that production, on that sort of conveyor belt. Loftus-Cheek certainly wouldn't be against another loan. He wouldn't also be against moving permanently, and certainly he isn't against trying another league. So I think if Lazio do come in with a good offer, then he might well end up going and playing in the sort of Eternal City for a year, or possibly even more permanently. Maurizio Sarri does really like the player, and Loftus-Cheek has a very good relationship with the manager. He sees Sarri as being the one who gave him his real sort of chance to really break through and become a regular, and that is going to be is a big thing in his mind. Moving on to next names on the list, Emerson Palmieri, we've sort of already covered. The other one I say is Marcos Alonso. Alonso isn't against looking for a new challenge this summer. There is interest from Atletico Madrid, although he's not first choice. As I said, Inter Milan interest is likely gone with Antonio Conte, but if Conte did pitch up somewhere else as a manager, I think he would maybe, look at him again. Certainly also, I won't rule out, and it's very unlikely at this moment in time, but I wouldn't rule out some sort of option that sees, again, someone saying Alonso will stay lol. Again, I wouldn't rule out Alonso going. I think it's less likely, but certainly if Hakimi comes in, it is felt by the club he can play on both sides of the defence and on both wings. So that sort of gives him a sort of cover in there. Centre-backs, we've already sort of covered that in detail, so I won't really go into that. Central midfield, I won't rule out Jorginho leaving, because the club aren't happy at his agent constantly going and talking to press. They like what the player's doing. The player's been in decent form recently, but they are acknowledging that he's not getting any younger. His deal, I think, expires, it's either next summer or the summer after, and he will be approaching
23.
Yeah, he will be approaching 30, and the club don't like doing more than 1 year extensions. So I think, again, if the right offer comes from the right club in Italy, then his agent certainly will be keen to have a conversation. And again, his minutes may become more marginalised if Chelsea bring in a sort of Declan Rice or a Aurélien Tchouaméni in that position. Who else we got on that list? We got
Callum.
Hudson-Odoi, yeah. So Hudson-Odoi is a difficult one. Chelsea rejected a very, very big bid for Hudson-Odoi last year from Bayern Munich, and it looked like it was going to be the end of it. However, the player has struggled a bit for form and consistency. There is a feeling on the training ground that he's not he is not not necessarily performing to the right level, but he's no longer as explosive as he used to be as a youngster, no longer takes sort of the chances that he was taking. He prefers to sometimes turn back inside when he could take on the man, etc. And the club winger. Now, Hudson-Odoi from his camp say he does want to stay and fight for his place. However, I think if, Bayern Munich do make another big offer again this summer, Chelsea will probably consider it, because I think there's a feeling that his development is maybe stalling and there is interest from elsewhere. There's also, I think Dortmund will look at the player if Jadon Sancho moves on, because they see him as a natural option to replace Sancho. And indeed, he is on their long list of potential replacements. But I think, at this moment in time, I think it's unlikely Hudson-Odoi moves on. I think he's less likely to move on than Ziyech, but it's certainly not something to rule out.
What about Tammy Abraham and Olivier Giroud?
So Olivier Giroud's one was a bit baffling, because Giroud thought, to all intents and purposes, he was about to join AC Milan. And then the club announced that they extended his contract. Now, with Olivier Giroud, I think the club extended it more to sort of profiteer to a little bit. And they have said that if the right offer comes in, they will let him go sort of for a fee. I think AC Milan will probably make a low offer. I think it will probably be accepted, and I think he will probably move to Milan. There might also be an offer from France coming in. Ultimately, the player isn't very happy at having his deal extended, and he has, made that quite clear privately to Chelsea. So I think, this is one where they just have to sort of, write it off almost in a way. In Tammy Abraham's case, it's a bit more difficult. Abraham was very close to signing a new deal under Frank Lampard, a long-term deal, but there were issues about wages and some other matters. And the club, since Thomas Tuchel's come in, again, there's a bit of a feeling that he's not sort of, necessarily buying into Tuchel's sort of style of play. He's necessarily not Tuchel's striker that he wants. And the club are aware he's not going to sign a new deal. So I think they're probably going to say, you can move this summer. In terms of interest, Borussia Dortmund have asked about the player. And again, if Erling Haaland goes, they might, possibly look to try and do something.
Part exchange possibly.
Again, I don't. Swap deals rarely happen, but it'd be more likely that they would do a separate deal for the player. But it's possible that the separate deal is going to come into the cards. Lighten that, some lighten. And I think, it's possible that will happen. Other names in the list, Leicester did have Abraham as an option to replace Hudson-Odoi if they didn't get Hudson-Odoi, but it looks like they'll probably get Hudson-Odoi from Celtic. Also, Aston Villa have long-term interest in the player. Borussia Dortmund, yes, they are interested in Charlie Webster, and that's one of the other reasons why Chelsea have stepped back from Sancho talks at this moment in time, because a lot of Sancho talks ended up becoming, okay, if we give you an option on Sancho, we get Charlie Webster. Going back to Tammy Abraham, Aston Villa present an option, although again, I don't necessarily think they would change formation to accommodate the player. They've already brought in Emi Buendia. They're looking at other big ticket targets, possibly with a view to Jack Grealish leaving or looking to sort of move on. The final sort of, I suppose, bit of a wild card name, and again, I think it'll probably more likely Giroud ends up there, but AC Milan have had an interest in him, and having looked at, they've already taken Tomori, who has a very good relationship with Tammy Abraham. It'll be more easy to entice younger English players now over to AC Milan because there's sort of, teammates in the dressing room.
Yeah, the goalkeeper situation. Chelsea do have a slight issue next season with Mendy going to the African Cup of Nations, and having Kepa as our second choice goalkeeper. Would he be going? Would he be staying? Would we be getting somebody else in? I know Donnarumma was mentioned, but maybe he is going to extend his contract. Maybe he isn't. Abiola has been mentioned as well. There's a few names. Where do we stand in regards to the goalkeeper situation, both ins and outs?
Chelsea's difficulty with Kepa is that there's a very long contract and there's significant wages for the player. Edouard Mendy has obviously come in and done very, very well, but at the same time, Kepa has made it clear that although he's happy he's happy enough this season, he wants to be playing in the longer term, and he has sort of actively had his people out, sort of trying to explore options for a transfer. Whether it would be a loan deal in the short term or potentially sort of a transfer deal, again, it'd be very hard to get an amount of value for the player at this moment in time. Chelsea have had conversations with clubs that are interested in sort of dry loans. There's a number of them that have at various times, including Sevilla, Villarreal, Lazio, Roma, have all expressed interest in a loan. But again, they're reluctant to agree to a long-term sort of fee or something, or if they want a fee at the end of it, they want something sort of minute. And with the nature of his long contract, the club aren't particularly keen on that. There's also a feeling from some members of the club that there is still a very good goalkeeper in there. The jury's sort of out for me on that one. In terms of replacing him, there are a few options. Firstly, Chelsea have two very good young goalkeepers in Nathan Baxter and Jamie Cumming, who've been out on loan at Accrington and Stevenage, respectively. And there's a bit of a feeling that, you could easily promote one of them to being number two. However, is it really beneficial for them at their age to be sitting on a bench when they could be playing? Obviously, there's a chance to look at, a veteran, older goalkeeper, potentially someone that's homegrown. The name Ben Foster keeps being thrown at me. I doubt it'll happen, but, he does fit into that criteria or that category. In terms of his Kepa, on over 200k a week. I didn't say over 200k a week. That has come from me. He's just on a significant wage for a goalkeeper. But, there are those options. There's also Carlo Zyga, who's another well-regarded player in the youth squad that they could promote. I think Chelsea will probably, at this moment in time, will wait and see what pans out with Kepa over the summer before doing something in the goalkeeping position. It's less of a sort of, issue at this moment in time, in their opinion, because Edouard Mendy's sort of there. And there's also a feeling that, if necessary, Kepa could maybe cover while at the AFCON. Certainly Tuchel has been impressed by the way Kepa's knuckled down and tried to regain his spot. He has trained very, very hard in the last few months, and the club, have acknowledged that.
Sure. Listen, lads, in the comments, there's one more topic me and what we're going to cover, and then I will give you the chance to just spam your questions in the chat. and we'll try to answer as many as possible. The third topic we want to cover is social media, journalism today, and journalism as it's reflected on social media. The Chelsea fan base as a whole, especially on Twitter, Rob, we've seen a lot of toxicity. That's the word that that follows Chelsea, especially with some of these new signings, with players not being given enough time, and transfer stories being blown out of proportion, rumors and whatnot. I know that this is a new phenomenon. I mean, over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it's become more apparent. What impact has this had on journalism as a whole, and what impact is this having on Chelsea and the Chelsea fan base in particular? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
I mean, in terms of journalism, it's making it incredibly difficult for young journalists now to be taken seriously, because people, even nowadays, you see people deriding Paul Fabrizio Romano, who's one of the hardest working people on social media, one of the hardest working people as a tap-in merchant. At the end of the day, if you don't like what he says, don't follow him. It's, a completely ridiculous sort of response, and, absolutely outrageous that I keep seeing that. Also, when people give you information, what people need to realise is that not always transfer information will be something you like to hear. A lot of the time, maybe, and in which case that's great. But if Chelsea sort of fans who sort of know what they're talking about give you information that you don't like to hear, then don't, just abuse them. Because there's absolutely no point in just abusing them and just, being abusive. And sort of, at the end of the day, we're giving that information up mainly sort of for free. And I don't mind doing that one bit, but at the same time, I appreciate common courtesy. Last year, when I sort of tweeted some stuff about Chelsea's transfer plans, I gained an awful lot of followers in 24 hours. However, I also got about 40 DMs worth of abuse, and subsequently from then, I just shut my DMs completely because I had no interest in taking abuse and taking nonsense from people. I also will say that increasingly there's a number of people popping up on social media that are just spouting complete nonsense. I'll give some of the accounts. CF Andreas, Di Panini for 2 of them, who I have rubbished and previously, have posted stuff that completely debunks them. They are gaining platforms now just off people being gullible. And off people being gullible, we saw this last year with CFC Dubois. He sort of claimed for about a month or so that he had insider information, posted a load of stuff. Loads of people believed it. He gained a platform about 15,000 people, and then suddenly revealed, it was all a big joke. Now, okay, it might have been hilarious to him, but to young journalists and stuff, to people like me, having actually had to work quite hard for what I do, it was a real slap in the mouth. And nowadays, seeing an account grow to sort of having 100,000 sort of followers for effectively having engaged in a month of just defrauding people and lying, it's pretty sad. Now, I'm not going to say he's the first. I'm not going to say he'll be the last. But all I'll say is if you think, a source is saying something to you, just sit back and wait for a second and maybe wait and see if they get a few things right. This is why I don't tend to tweet stuff personally on my social media, because I keep my in the know stuff to being quite private. Occasionally I do come on podcasts and do share them, and I do sort of, share them privately. But I won't just go out and putting it all out on all over my social media content, because ultimately I don't want the grief. I don't want the nonsense that comes with it. In terms of player abuse as well, if football, I appreciate, is an emotional game, and I appreciate we all get emotional. I appreciate we all say things we shouldn't, and get caught by the heat at the moment. But if you ever suddenly think after a game that your best thing you can go and do is send an abusive message to a player, log out, go for a walk, go do something you like to do, get yourself in a better frame of mind. Because at no point is it ever... It'd be the same as if you went to work, for instance, and someone just hurled some abuse at you on the way to work. Or if you went to school and someone hurled some abuse at you at school. They're just doing their job. And at times, people really need to remember that.
No, it's definitely tough. It's definitely tough. And it's definitely changed the way that people have to interact with the media and how the media interacts with people. And I think it's something that more attention needs to be put on, and I think people need to take it with a pinch of salt sometimes. Not everything that you're going to read on social media is coming from credible sources. Not everything that you're reading on social media is nonsense, but you have to take it with a pinch of salt sometimes and just wait for the story to develop properly, rather than just jumping on the bandwagon and taking it in one direction. Lads, I am going to give you a chance to send me your questions to Rob. Listen, I'm not going to have Rob on this channel every day, so he's here today. This is your opportunity to ask him. You can ask him Chelsea-related questions. You can ask him football-related questions, journalism questions. So go right ahead, and I will display your questions on the screen. I'm going to go back and look at some of the old ones. Bowlers, I'm sorry, mate. I had no idea I was going to give you a video idea. I didn't know what was coming to your channel tomorrow. I have.
I think he means in terms of social media and football.
Yeah. No. Burton Bowlers, lads, is a very, very good channel. Burton Bowlers is a very what's the word here? Reputable in regards to the way that he goes out there and gets his information. So yeah, Burton Bowlers, guys, make sure you check it out. There's a question here. When is Roman Abramovic going to pay money for Holland? I mean, how long is this story gonna drag on, mate? I mean, is this gonna be another Kai Havertz kind of scenario?
Yeah, strap yourself in for a long one. Strap yourself in. This will not be a quick deal if it does happen. It will be one where both sides want to feel like they get the most out of it, like they get the best part of the deal, and there will be huge, involvements in it.
I know we addressed this a little bit, but do you think this is going to happen? I mean, realistically, will this happen, Hudson-Odoi?
I really don't know. I think it's possible, but I think it's unlikely at this moment in time, but it's possible.
And are we expecting to see another bid for Hakimi?
I don't like commenting on timings of transfer deals, but I think Chelsea will make another bid.
Okay. Michael Green, yes, Rob. Mike here. Can you give any more information about the CDM targets? My screen is rolling. Yeah, we kind of addressed this. Do you have anything to add on this, Rob, with regards to CDMs and
the names? The main names are Declan Rice, Aurelien Tchouameni, and also Boubacar Kamara at Marseille. Chelsea do really like the player, although Manchester City are really pushing for an agreement for Marseille at the moment for him. He plans on leaving because his contract's up next summer and has made it clear he won't renew. There's a lot of other interest in the player, but I think, it will likely be Manchester City at this moment in time. Other names in CDM that Chelsea have considered, they've looked at Denis Zakaria before at Borussia Mönchengladbach, and again, it wouldn't be out of the question to see them look at him again, although I think he's more interested in other opportunities. Chelsea have been offered Yves Bissouma by his agent, who wants, to manoeuvre a move to a Champions League club, but I don't think Chelsea will take up that offer. There are, again, an awful lot of players have been offered to Chelsea in the last couple of months by agents, and it just hasn't, really gone anywhere. So I'm sure there are other names in CDM as well.
In regards to this, Lampard is no longer our manager, but he is still one of our legends. Any insight in regards to his job opportunities moving forward?
I'm afraid I don't know anything at this moment in time. I know he did, he spoke to Crystal Palace, and the issue with Crystal Palace is that a lot of managers are going to be annoyed as the lack of finances and the fact that a lot of a rebuild will need to be done in order to fund sort of a rebuild will involve selling big ticket players. I think there would have been a lot of interest in Eze this summer had he not been injured. And I think, it would have been a fight to keep a hold of him. So I think, Lampard will be looking for the right opportunity, not necessarily trying to jump straight back into management.
Sancho, going to Man United, is this a done deal?
It's not a done deal at this moment in time. They have a broad agreement with Jadon Sancho over personal terms, but they don't have any agreement with Borussia Dortmund. They haven't made a bid yet to Dortmund formally. They know how much they need to pay. They've known for a long, long time how much they need to pay. They continue just to sort of skirt around the deal. This is the sort of one where if they're really not careful, then they could end up, completely scuffing this again, because Dortmund want to know where they stand with players going in and out quite soon. They ideally want an idea of it by the end of June. And if it doesn't get sorted by then they will just, say, well, they're staying, which is also, I think, like Chelsea will start pushing for Erling Haaland more in the next couple of weeks, because if they put pressure on that deal, suddenly that can also impact the Sancho deal.
All right. Rob, how good are you for time? I want to start another segment, but what are you like for time?
Yeah, I can do a little bit longer.
All right, okay. Lads in the chat, we're going to have a 1 minute break. Then we're going to come back in, and I'm going to allow you to jump into the panel and to speak to us directly. I'm going to put a link in the chat that you can click on and jump in and talk to us directly. Just be nice to Rob, yeah, lads? Rob, you got a 58-second break coming up. I'll see you on the back end. All right, mate? Yo, welcome back to the stream. Welcome back, lads. Burton Ballers, upside down. All right, Max, how are you?
Yeah, hi. I was just quickly grabbing my mic. Yeah.
No, no worries, mate. Hey, listen, Max, I didn't know you were going to do a similar type of stream tomorrow, man.
No, not a stream. I was going to do a video just on what you're talking about with some of these rumours from, these people who just try to make a name for themselves by, And I actually caught somebody out a couple of years ago. I'm not sure you remember the Pogba situation, Paul Pogba. So what had happened is this guy was a bit of an opportunist, and it actually worked out quite well for him, because he said that Chelsea were going to be getting Pogba, and 2 days later Pogba was out in Harrods shopping, and so he was actually in London, and so there was a lot of pictures of him out there. So on the back of that, he was carrying on this story, and I kept outing him on Twitter about it, because sometimes you could see the genuine ones, and you're not, by just some of the things that they're saying. And I kept questioning him at every turn. But then he actually DM'd me and said to me, "I know you're onto me, but can you just let me have my bit of fun, please?" So I kind of laid off a little bit, and then he eventually got caught out.
Yeah. Well, listen, Max, you're free to use any clips from my stream onto your on your video. You can, just link Bob's socials, link my channel, and go right ahead and add it. I want to welcome Bobby, and I want to welcome, who was this new guy? What's his name? Green3101. Listen, lads, anybody in the chat, if you want to come on and talk to us, click on the link that I've just posted in the chat, and you're more than welcome to take part. Listen, today it's all about Rob. We have Rob, a Chelsea journalist, here with us. So take this opportunity to ask him and discuss with him any issues you have regarding our beloved Chelsea. So take it away, lads. You're all welcome. Go ahead. Alex, welcome to the stream. Just saw you there, mate.
All good, Baggy, all right?
Silence.
Right. Baggy, I didn't catch the name of our guest.
Rob.
Rob.
Yeah.
Hi,
Rob.
Rob.
On the screen, man.
Yeah. So I want to ask Rob a question. Go on, Ben. You go first.
Sorry, about Tchouaméni.
Yeah.
There's a lot of word about that, and I just want to know whether it's real. Are we after him? Is this a realistic deal for Chelsea? I hope so, but what do you know about it?
Yeah, there's interest in Aurelien Tchouaméni. Again, a deal would have been easier if Monaco hadn't qualified for the Champions League because they aren't cash rich. However, having qualified for it and having him won the Liga and Young Player of the Year award, suddenly they've realised, hang on, this is quite a valuable player. They would like him ideally to extend and then, profiteer for an auction next summer when he'll probably end up being one of the big ticket names suddenly breaking into the France senior squad on a more regular basis. At the same time, there is interest from Chelsea, Manchester City. Loads of clubs would like the player, but I think Monaco will try and resist a sale at the moment. However, if a significant amount of money gets put on the table, especially if it's put up front rather than over a period of instalments, then I think Monaco will, think twice about saying no. Chelsea have a clear number one target. It's not Tchouaméni, it's Declan Rice. But if they can't get Declan Rice, then I think, suddenly Tchouaméni may become quite a sort of prominent target. It's worth noting Chelsea have a good relationship with Monaco as well. So that could also, play into their hands.
What is a significant amount of money for Tchouaméni?
I don't. The first rule of transfer club for Rob is you don't discuss finances, and the second rule is you don't discuss finances. You would be looking at something, I'd say, north of £30 million at least. Certainly, when they were approached by a different club, not Chelsea, they quoted a higher fee than that, although they were looking for something with instalments involved. So I think, it's one of those things. Football fees are always very sort of liminal, and I never like taking too much into them because the reported fee is never the same. The only people that really ever know transfer fees are the player that's being bought, the club selling the player, and the club buying the player, and the transfer commission. Everything else is just conjecture.
Sure.
Yeah, a couple of questions from me. I put one in the chat. I think it was missed, but Di Marzio today came out and said that Harry Kane was the striker that Roman Abramovich really wants. So obviously we're hearing conflicting stories. Some people are saying Harry Kane, some people are saying Haaland, and others are probably saying Lukaku still hasn't gone away. So just want to get your thoughts on that one. And the other one was another person we've been linked with in the past, another midfielder, is Camavinga.
Yeah.
What are your insight? What's your inside information on him as well?
So I'll start off with Eduardo Camavinga. Camavinga is someone who Chelsea, along with half of Europe's elite, have scouted extensively and looked at the player. Chelsea had an initial discussion with Stade Rennes after the Champions League tie earlier this season and discussed the player. The issue Chelsea have is that Camavinga wants assurances about the amount of minutes he gets, and also Stade Rennes want a really significant fee. The player has now told Stade Rennes he won't renew his contract, and he wants ideally to move to Real Madrid. Real Madrid really like the player, but they're not really in a position to pay something financially, so they'd be looking to do horse trading, swapping players about. Juventus also have long-term interest in Eduardo Camavinga. Borussia Dortmund have a level of interest in the player to replace Axel Witsel. I think probably Camavinga is most likely to stay in France, and I think PSG will put the money up. I think they will be told to go away from Tchouaméni because I don't think Monaco will want to sell, but I think Stade Rennes will probably accept a bid from PSG for Camavinga to keep him in France so he can keep developing and also to keep a French poster boy in the league. Because that's one of the other big things is that Ligue 1 are concerned that if they lose Kylian Mbappe, they lose one of the really big poster boys for the league, and one of the really big French national poster boys as well. And Eduardo Camavinga is the biggest young one of those.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you on my second question, but you just because you mentioned about PSG wanted him. Another story was about Verratti. What I heard about Verratti and Chelsea.
I think the Verratti story is someone putting 2 + 2 together and making 5. Tuchel likes the player. Chelsea have liked the player in the past. I can't see PSG looking, letting him leave. He's a wonderful footballer, albeit a really nasty player, but a wonderful, wonderful footballer. But I can't see PSG wanting to let him sort of leave. I think, you'd be looking at a very, very high fee, and I don't even think they'd, be willing to discuss it.
Yes, Rob. It's Mike from the chat.
Yeah, hello, Mike.
Hello, mate. You're right. Yeah, just want to say, on behalf of everyone, really, thanks just for the time you give, to be honest, mate.
That's all right.
It's
happy to do it. As I've always said, I'm happy to, do it as long as people are being civil and courteous, and please accept that some of the stuff I say here won't come true. I'm not going to come out and say that everything here is gospel, and that tomorrow you will see we've made another bid for Achraf Hakimi, and that we've agreed a fee for Erling Haaland, etc. Obviously, if that does happen, then I'll happily accept all checks payable to me. But football transfers are sort of one of those things that change on a snap, and at this moment in time, it's the best sort of I'm giving the best level of insight that I can.
Yeah, I did have a question though. Don't worry, it's not about central defensive midfielders. I was going to ask you about Tammy Abraham.
Yeah.
A lot of people seem to think that it's a given that he's going to go. I thought for a long time, I think it would be a lot more difficult than people think. If we run into a situation which is very similar to last season, where Lampard, we'd made a lot of signings, but there was a lot of players left over that Lampard probably didn't want in his squad. Mm-hmm. And it did cause a little bit of unrest. We found out about that from journalists high profile journalists and like The Athletic, for example, after Lampard went. Sure. If Tammy Abraham was to stay because he can't be moved on for whatever reason, do you think there'll be some sort of conflict there? Because obviously it's quite obvious that Tuchel doesn't want to use it.
Yeah, I really don't know. I think the player himself will take destiny into his own hands and will force a move if he needs to. And I don't blame him for that. At the end of the day, as a young player, he needs to be playing regular minutes. He will still have ambitions of getting into that England World Cup squad. Again, I know from people that have told me he's very disappointed to have not made the Euros squad and doesn't feel he's had a chance to sort of make the Euros squad, especially considering that behind Harry Kane, there is certainly striking spots available for England.
Yeah.
And I think, there are a lot of opportunities for him. Will Chelsea maybe live to regret it? That's going to be one we'll have to look back in 5 years' time. But at the same time, I think, you can't really think ill of Tammy Abraham for wanting to play regular minutes. I will never sort of, criticise a player for if they want to move on because they want to play more regularly rather than sit on the bench or sit in the reserves.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, nothing against him. It's more to do with the financials, I guess. I know you don't like talking about financials, but if Chelsea don't get what they think is right for him, then I think he will. I think he will look to force a move, and I think if he starts kicking up more of a not necessarily fuss, but looks to sign sort of really put his feelers out there, there will be clubs that will pay the money. Of course.
Because he's well regarded in sort of English football and around Europe as well.
Yeah.
Just for a question, someone's asking, what's my favourite burger topping? It's got to be like really good cooked smoky bacon, really like nice cooked smoky bacon.
Yeah, you get all kinds of questions in the chat.
Any question that doesn't mention central defence midfielders and is on burger topping, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Going back to my first part of the question, which was about Harry Kane. Remember that one?
Yeah. So I said earlier, Chelsea wanted to do something spectacular this summer. And from what I understood when I had a conversation with someone about this, it was that bring in a striker that, will make the league sit up and go, wow. Chelsea have before been asked by Harry Kane's agent, if Harry Kane became available, would they be interested? And Chelsea came back and said, yes, but we don't think Spurs will sell to us. If the player did openly end up on the market and an auction started, then I think Chelsea would probably put a bid in, or I think they'd at least offer to match terms. I think Bayern Munich would do the same. I think Real Madrid, have an interest in the player. Paris Saint-Germain under Pochettino, if he had the chance, would bring Harry Kane to France right now. I still think he probably ends up at Manchester City. I think it's probably one of those ones that will rumble. It'll rumble till after the Euros. Kane has, quite publicly come out and made noises about wanting to go. and Spurs, as a result of that, especially if the new manager comes in, it's going to be a real challenge for the new manager to persuade Harry Kane to want to stay, because they're not cash rich. They have got a rebuilding job on at the club, and there are players that are unsettled. There are a number of players in the Spurs squad that are unsettled and are thinking, hang on, I'm getting to sort of 30 or later in my career and not playing games, not winning trophies. What am I doing here?
DJ Sav, welcome to the stream.
I think the telltale sign as well was when Conte didn't take up the job. That's definitely means to me that Harry Kane's going then.
Yeah, I would say for a fact that Antonio Conte, like, one of the main demands that he would have put forward to Spurs would have been, assurances on control of transfers. With Fabio Paratici coming in, it suggests to me they're looking at a situation where there's working with a Doff, and although Conte has worked before with Fabio Paratici and has quite a good working relationship with him, one of his big issues at Inter Milan has been the fact that transfers have been done over his head, and he's not had much of a say in who goes and who comes. And at times they've let him have his targets, but other times they've not. And as a result of that, that's why he walked.
I can't say I have any special knowledge on transfers or squad selection or anything like that, but I have been hearing rumblings about the fact that Xavier Mbayamba will be given an opportunity, certainly in pre-season, to see if he could join the Chelsea first team squad. Is there any legs in that? Young player, 18 years old.
There are some legs in that. Mbayamba was very well regarded when signed, and Chelsea felt they got a bit of a coup by bringing him in. I think he's spent a year now getting himself fully fit and getting himself fully, ready. Again, Chelsea have a lot of very good centre-backs at the club. They've got a lot of very good young centre-backs. So I think more likely Mbayamba will probably spend another 6 months maybe in the under-23s before a loan in the second half of the season. Or maybe if a really good loan opportunity comes out. Again, I've heard suggestions that he might be sent to Vitesse for the year. He spent time before in Holland as well. So it's possible, that might work out for all parties. But he's very, very well regarded. So it wouldn't surprise me if Mbayamba did get fast-tracked through.
Yeah, I understood when he first came and they had a 2-year plan for him anyway, mapped out. So he's definitely, he knows that probably not next year, but he'll be in the first team, but the year after, if everything goes to plan.
He had quite a bad injury, I think.
Yeah.
Had surgery done.
Nice. I've been asked a question about the story about the cows. So basically, it's a bit of an inside joke, but I'm in a group chat with a number of sort of very good Chelsea fans, and I like to have some fun with them when it comes to transfers. I don't like making my transfer news, open. Where's the fun in that? I like showing cryptic things. So I shared a picture of a cow with a number 7 on its head last week, and just wanted to see how people, jumped at it. In reference, it was actually about N'Golo Conte getting a new deal. But at the same time, people started suddenly jumping on the fact that it was Jadon Sancho's number. So I decided to start having some fun with them. I just have people absolutely not. So yeah, be warned. If you ask me about transfers, there's one of 3 outcomes you'll either get. Number 1, I'll be honest with you, say I don't know, but I can ask someone who will know. Number 2 is I can give you an answer. Number 3 is I'll give you a really sarcastic response. And it just depends on the phases of the moon really as to which one you get.
Are they being a bit worried that we're after Falcao again?
I've been trying to avoid talking. I've been trying to avoid talking about Haaland, but I can't resist it. I've got to say, I can't imagine Dortmund turning away if Chelsea drop 120 million for Haaland. It just doesn't make any sense. That is almost double what they'll get for him summer next year. So I don't know. What do you think about that? I've been hearing it's now down to Roman, that the player wants to come. Dortmund wants to see the colour of Roman's money.
Yeah, that's pretty much where we're at now, is that if Roman puts a serious bid on the table, then, something can be done, I think. But it's going to be very, very expensive.
I guess the good thing is that Haaland, he's not in the Euros. So I think the business there can be done in a better way. Do you think that Chelsea's business would kind of maybe rise up, because I think do you think there will be that many links with Chelsea during the Euros or more after?
I really don't know I mean, the club at the moment are actively working on deals, and they are actively working on moving players in and getting players out. I'm not going to, go and speak names and say who's done what, where they've discussed what, because I'd be here for forever. But, actively stuff is going on. I think Chelsea will be okay with doing business during the Euros, especially if players aren't there. I don't think they'll want to, if they have a player they want to sign who's at the Euros, I don't think they'll try and do it during the Euros because it's an unnecessary distraction. And you also never know if a player's at the Euros, for instance, if you agree a deal to sign them and then suddenly they get injured for sort of 9 months or something. Touch wood that doesn't happen. I never like seeing any player injured, whether it's a Chelsea player or any rival player, even a Spurs player. I never like seeing any player getting injured, but there is always that issue you run if you sign someone in an international tournament. I think there's a chance. Deals can be done in the next couple of weeks.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly
do you think if Chelsea don't manage, because I think they're not they're one of their targets is to get a striker, but if they don't actually go and manage and find a proper striker, do you think they could maybe look at a Jadon Sancho and maybe go in for him? Like, are they still kind of linked with him? Or are they still? Are they look? Yeah.
The situation with Sancho for any club is quite simple. Personal terms are expensive because there's a big agent fee involved, and that's what caused Chelsea. Chelsea had a chance to bring Jadon Sancho to the club, not last January, but the January beforehand if they wanted. And they chose not to because they chose to take a different track and look at Kai Havertz instead, because the agent fees are a lot lower, the costs involved in the deal were a lot lower, and there was a bit of a feeling with the Sancho deal that as a young English player, there would be more pressure on him than a young German player in England. With Sancho last summer, again, there was a situation where the fee was made pretty clear. He had an agreement with Borussia Dortmund, and if a club matched the price, then he could go. Manchester United spent an entire summer trying to lower a price that was never going to lower. And I've said before, my opinions on Manchester United. Manchester United have won some of the worst transfer dealings in business. They have truly awful managers. Some of the stories that I've heard of players they've tried to bring in are, absolutely shambolic, considering the size of the club that they are. In a way, it makes me feel sorry for some of their more genuine fans because, it's just diabolical and shambolic. Coming to this summer, again, the situation is quite clear. If a club pays the amount of money that Dortmund want, which is around 95 million euros for a sort of fee to put to it, he will be allowed to go. And if a club matches the personal terms and the fees involved, he will be allowed to go. They will not block it. However, the longer teams stop doing that, and the longer, this drags on, the more and more Dortmund will start to think, hang on, is it worth us looking elsewhere at other transfers? Because they don't want another summer of having their squad unsettled. Because last had, Sancho got very, very unsettled.
Would also this be an interesting thing where, because we know that Man United take a very long time to do their business. If Chelsea get their business done with Haaland, I think we know that. I think they would want to let Sancho go before Haaland. But if let's say the Haaland deal would actually be kind of let's say they do it before the Sancho deal, would that play any part in it? Or I don't know.
I think. Again, it's one of those things with the money. I think if the money's put out in front of Dortmund, it's very hard to say no to it, especially the fact that, Haaland with the release clause can leave next summer for a much lower fee. In terms of Sancho, they were planning on replacing the player last summer. They have a list of replacements still, and different names that they'd like to bring in to replace him. They did lose out on their first choice target to replace Jadon Sancho. He went elsewhere last summer. But I think it's one of those ones where if the money's put down, despite what Dortmund say about not wanting to lose them both, if the money gets put down, I think you'll see a different tune. And we saw this last year with Kai Havertz with Bayer Leverkusen. We heard Leverkusen weren't keen on selling and didn't want to sell. But once, the figures start being put down and the money starts being put on the table, you get a very different noise.
And do you think there'll be any news on maybe even then Dortmund knowing what they would do next if they let Sancho go, they let Haaland go? Would there actually be players that they would actually could bring in? And actually
they've got an extensive list of targets to replace both of them. Personally, again, I feel Dortmund did miss a bit of a trick last summer because they didn't move on. If they'd have moved on Sancho maybe a bit quicker and got a deal in place, they had very close to signing Ferran Torres from Valencia at the time, and then he obviously moved to City for quite a low fee. I think they missed out on that deal because I think Ferran's a fantastic player and would do really well in the Bundesliga. Other names they like Daniel Marlon, they like Silas and Vonga and Poku, who was previously Wamangituka at Stuttgart. They like Tanguy Koulibaly. They do like Callum Hudson-Odoi. So, they've got an extensive scouting network, and there are other names sort of further down the list that they will look at. The thing is if the money comes in, Dortmund also have lost a lot of money in the pandemic. They have been German clubs have been very badly hit, apart from Bayern. Even Bayern haven't, weathered it as well, because so much of their money doesn't come in from revenue from fans coming in. It comes in from other sources. And with those other sources not being available because sponsorship has dwindled because of the pandemic, it suddenly means that they, have to find up and make up costs elsewhere.
Rob, similar question about the Sancho thing, but with Haaland.
Yeah.
We know that Dortmund, Zorc, I think it's Zorc, isn't it? Who's the guy that...
Mikel Zorc, yeah.
Yeah, he's quite hardline. He reminds me a bit like the guy from Lyon and the guy from Napoli. They're very sort of determined characters.
Yeah.
Last summer, they set a deadline with Man United, and they wanted it sorted, especially before they started their pre-season.
Yeah.
I think it'd be very similar with Haaland, because I can imagine they'll want to replace him very quickly.
Possibly, although in this case, there's the other added bonus of Mino Raiola being involved.
Yeah,
and Mino Raiola will do what Mino Raiola wants to do, and he won't give a damn what Dortmund want in this equation. He will want to do whatever is best for his own pockets, and then second for his player. So if he decides that Erling Haaland is moving to Chelsea, he will make it happen.
Yeah. The other thing. Go on. Go for it. Go on.
Go on, Boogeyman. Welcome to the stream, Boogeyman.
Yeah,
thank you, guys. I have a quick question. I was following the beginning of the stream, and I heard Bob saying under Frank Lampard, Rudiger and Christensen were the gone, and Frank Lampard was willing to renew Zuma's contract.
Yeah.
And then Tuchel came in, and then the situation kind of changed. Zuma is the potential gun now, or he's not gone yet. So my question is, how is a sport director decide? Two coaches have two different ideas. So how do we know at this point, like with the talk of Varane, the talk of all those Gay coming in, how do we decide which defender should go? Like at this point, we just win the Champions League with a specific defense line. Which one of them should be the gun now?
It's one of those ones. It's very difficult because I think Zuma's had a decent season, in all honesty, at the club. However, I don't necessarily think he fits in with the three at the back. I think at times he does panic on the ball. And one of the things you really notice when Chelsea have Rudiger's improved immensely on his distribution, but Christensen and Thiago Silva naturally are very good at passing out from the back. And if you're going to play that three at the back, you need that. If you're playing at four at the back, it's a bit less important because you can probably have, you don't really require it. You're probably more likely to try and play it up in towards the midfield. Now, I'm of the view this summer that if Chelsea are moving on centre-backs this summer, they need to be bringing in players that are as good standard, if not better. They can't be affording to bring in squad players. So I think this is why the centre-back position is going to become a lesser priority in my view, because if it isn't, broken, there's no need to fix it. And unless Zuma actively is looking to move on, which indeed he may be after, the Euros and stuff, especially if he ends up playing for France and has a good Euros, then, at the end of the day, he's not getting any younger as well. He needs to be playing regular minutes at his age.
Thank you.
That's all right.
All I was going to say, Rob, was I know a lot of people like to joke like, oh, Roman's going to ruin football again, blah, 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 like it's 2004.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, financial fair play is dead, doesn't exist anymore. But the truth of the matter is there still is stuff there. It's all fine us going out and buying Haaland, Hakimi. I'm not saying we'll get Rice, but just like that. Surely there must be some, I know we've got Champions League money, but surely there has to be some kind of balancing of the books to a degree.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it does, basically, it relies on players being sold, essentially. Does that make sense?
To an extent, certainly there are, deals that can be done before players are sold, but, to a lot, just for balancing the squad and managing the squad, there are also, it's worth noting, even though the new loan rules aren't coming in for another year, Chelsea want to move on people like Timu Bakayoko, Danny Drinkwater, David Zappacosta, that are older players that have been out on loan that don't have a long-term future at the club, and they will ultimately make an amount of revenue. They've also already lost players off the wage bill this year. Again, Van Ginkel has sort of gone. They've lost Willy Caballero, who's not on a huge amount of wages, but it's players coming off the wage bill. They will continue to trim the wage bill as well. And it's more about bringing in, as I've said, bringing in quality this summer rather than quantity. It's not going to be like last summer where they bring in 5, 6, 7 players. It's going to be about bringing in top players.
So basically all I was going to say was it's not about on a transfer sheet saying you've spent, I know it's more to it than this, but say like you've spent 200 million. It's not like, oh, you've got to try and make that most of that up through sales. There are other avenues where they can't penalise you, essentially.
Yeah, there are other avenues. There's also, financial fair play is currently undergoing a bit of a restructuring, shall we say. That sort of, it's still a bit up in the air. And finally, Chelsea, as I've said, are quite cash rich. They have money coming in from players before. We've already seen Tomori going for a significant fee. They have add-ons on Mario Pasalic that are coming or sort of maturing this summer. There are other add-ons and other deals as well. They made some money last year off Jeremy Boga by removing the buyback clause. There are a lot of ways Chelsea can bring money into the club quite quickly.
Okay.
Quick question on Jude Bellingham. Sorry.
Max, just give me a second. I just want to welcome Shadow to the stream. Shadow, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing well, mate. How you doing?
Not bad, not bad. Shadow, feel free to jump in at any point you want to jump in. It's an open discussion. Max, sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah,
Carry on,
that's
mate.
fine. That's fine. No, just a quick question on Jude Bellingham. Obviously, we were linked with him as a 16-year-old when he was at Birmingham, but obviously it was the right career path for him, I believe, because he'll get the opportunities with Dortmund. There was talk that we were still interested in him. Do you think, obviously not probably for next season, but for the season after, is there still interest in him? And do you think we'll go in for him eventually?
There's still a lot of interest from loads of English clubs. It'll end up being an auction in a few years' time. At the end of the day, he's the big ticket English youngster at this moment in time, alongside the likes of your Sanchos and other names that are coming out, and Bellingham will end up in. It'll just end up being an auction in a few years' time. Interestingly, I know the player himself turned down very good offers from Chelsea, from Arsenal and Manchester United because of Dortmund's career path. I think also you will find that Bayern Munich will offer him an option to stay in Germany because they will see him as, another good young top player they can bring in. And naturally, there's the sort of allure of moving from Dortmund to Bayern is always going to be there.
Yeah.
I don't want to dominate, but someone else.
It's a very interesting.
I've got a question. What's the news on Malang Sarr? What's Chelsea doing with Malang Sarr? What are they doing with him?
So Malang Sarr is an interesting one because Chelsea again brought him in last year with an intention that he might be one of those options to come into the squad this season because they didn't think Thiago Silva was necessarily going to renew. However, then Thiago did really well, and so they renewed the deal. And Malang Sarr, at the same time, started struggling a bit while out on loan in Porto and started playing for the B side. In all honesty, I think probably Chelsea realistically need to look at moving on for a sensible fee this summer and just, making a bit of profit on the deal. He came in on the cheap. He was a bit of a speculative punt. He was someone who the club had scouted for a long time. In reality, it hasn't really worked out. There's not a long-term future in my view. And it's, again, he'll come back in pre-season and really impress. But ultimately, I think he needs to move on for the good of his career. He's not getting any younger now. So,
Malang Sarr and the Zuma, what's the big difference? I don't. I watch a few of his game. I just don't see what Malang Sarr will be improving at Chelsea defense. It's just like a copy of Zuma.
Yeah, Malang Sarr, the feeling around Malang Sarr was that he maybe could be brought in as more of a very defensive left-back option, as sort of a bit like a more of a Wan-Bissaka style left-back who's really good defensively. However, he doesn't like playing left-back. He wants to play at centre-back, and then that goes against him because I don't believe he's the tallest player. He's certainly not the most physical player. So I think, Chelsea, it's just one of those ones where Chelsea took a bit of a punt on a player on a free transfer. It's not going to work out and, they can move him on. He might get a chance in pre-season. Maybe he'll come through and really impress and make another issue in the centre-back position, but I think it's unlikely.
Thank you.
We talked about how Mbappe has now sent a message out about talking to Tuchel at the end of the Euros.
Has he?
Yeah, he sent a message basically saying what he said to Klopp, how he's been impressed with what Chelsea's done. He's been impressed with Tuchel.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Kylian Mbappe certainly wasn't one of the players that wanted Thomas Tuchel to leave PSG. He was certainly very happy with him in the way he was managing. At the end of the day, Tuchel took quite a laissez-faire approach to both Neymar and Mbappe because again, as you'll be unsurprised to learn, one of the main things at PSG is just keep them both happy. I still think Real Madrid are going to, push and look to make a deal. I don't think Mbappe will end up. If he ends up in the Prem, it'll be at Manchester City because there'll be a huge, huge fee involved. There'll be huge issues involved, and there's huge wages involved. PSG, the offer they've put to renew to him is staggering. It is a staggering amount of weekly wages, and if he rejects that because he wants to go to Real Madrid, then it sort of says that to me it'd be a red flag sort of transfer, because it's the sort of one where that really would. We talk about Haaland potentially upsetting the apple cart, and Mbappe would upset the apple cart.
Yeah, I don't think Mbappe would suit our style. Like, we need a fighter of a striker. Like, we've had the Costas and the Drogbas, and we haven't had that for a while. And I feel like Haaland would potentially fulfill that, but who knows? I'm probably on the other side of the opinion on Lukaku. I'm not interested in having Lukaku. He's failed twice at Chelsea already. He didn't do too well at Man United. So, I mean, he's doing all right in Italy, but I don't see the hype on it myself.
Yeah, Lukaku's a difficult one. I mean, I thought Lukaku was dealt maybe a bit of an unfair hand at Chelsea. He never really got a proper look in. Did well out on loan a couple of times, but at the end of the day, I think, he came back at the time when Jose Mourinho was there, and Jose wants a very, certain type of striker. He wants a polished sort of, a polished, powerful centre forward at all of his clubs. And Lukaku wasn't at that point at that time. When he was at Manchester United, I think he did all right. Again, he was made a bit of a scapegoat, I think, for the fact the club is struggling. And has done very well at Inter Milan. But he himself is quite settled in Italy. And although, Antonio Conte was a big selling factor to him to go to Inter Milan, but I still think that, if the Haaland deal doesn't happen, I still wouldn't rule out a move for Lukaku, because I think as long as an opportunity is still there, Chelsea might explore it. But I think he's certainly not anywhere near as high up the list of targets as people may have been anticipating.
I have two questions, if I may.
Bobby, just 1 second. I want to address the Gallagher situation, because we kind of left him out in the earlier segments. Where are we in regards to him?
So Conor Gallagher, again, has had a decent loan spell at West Brom. I think he was named their Young Player of the Year, or the Players Player of the Year, or Fans Player of the Year, or something like that. He himself has got ambitions of coming back and playing in the first team. However, he wants chances and doesn't want to, be a squad player. He, again, has ambitions of maybe getting himself into the England reckoning for 2022. And as a result of that, he, I think, will come back to the club and will say, give me a chance in pre-season, give me assurances on minutes, or let me go. In terms of interest in the player, Crystal Palace are very, very keen in the player, regardless of who they bring as manager. There is interest from Leeds United, and there's historic interest in him. They've tried to bring him in before. I think, there is interest as well from the continent, from clubs in Germany in the player. Again, I don't think he'll go out on loan, because his contract, I think, is up in 2022. And it's not really one where if Chelsea sign him up to a new contract and he goes on loan again, he sort of ends up in that same situation in 12 months' time where there's no clear pathway. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me, especially if he signed a new deal, see Gilmour go out on loan this summer and maybe Gallagher get more minutes next season in Gilmour's sort of spot in the squad.
Yeah. Bobby, I cut you off for a second there. So please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I have two questions, if I can sort of offload them. I know we're coming at you from all angles, really. But first of all, Armando Broja, is there any truth in the fact that Chelsea may be keen to have him in the first team squad next season? And then... I'm just going to reel off two while it's still fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
Then my other question is in and around Mbappe. And part of it is just, a thought. Now, Mbappe has a year left on his contract. And clearly the Arab owners of PSG will give him an arm and a leg to stay. But don't you think at his age, there comes a point where you can earn money wherever you go, where all the money in the world is not enough for you to be where you can actually test yourself and ply your craft to the very top? Now, the French league, at best, some people like to call it a farmers' league. I just will be slightly more respectful and just say, compared to other top leagues in Europe, it's not really up there.
Yeah.
The German league is a one-horse race. the Spaniards are struggling for money. That is a known fact, and not what they were. Maybe in a few years they can get back to the top again because they will always have avenues of credit and financial resustenance put their way. And really, at the moment, England is the place to be. The English Premier League is the place to be. There's money. The Chelsea project is perhaps one of the most, if not the most attractive project for top players in the world. And really, Chelsea should be looking at just sustaining success in order to sustain attraction. And Manchester City equally have a lot of money. Now, why would Mbappe stay at PSG?
It's French.
Because PSG have a lot of money as well.
Yeah, but will they give him the quality? Will they give him the environment that will really stimulate him and make him happy? Really? Is he going to want to stay in Ligue 1?
If Paris Saint-Germain win a Champions League next year, I doubt he will be unhappy. I appreciate what people say about Ligue 1, and I appreciate what people say. At the end of the day, let's not forget Ligue 1 is where currently our best player in our squad, in my view, came from, and our previous best player came from. Let's not forget that. I think I personally am of the view that Kylian Mbappe wants Real Madrid and will try and manoeuvre that move to Real Madrid, but PSG at the moment, as I've said, want that high-profile French player. He's the poster boy for all this stuff. Again, the one I was surprised really renewed was Neymar, because Neymar, ever since going to PSG, he was the poster boy and then now has been put out of it by sort of Kylian Mbappe. And this is why I think Mbappe may not renew, because I think Neymar's got the money on the table now, has got the offer. Mbappe will want higher than that because Mbappe, as a younger player, will feel he's worth more than that. The other thing is also, you maybe forget, is that he's playing in France. He is absolutely adored in France. And even as playing for Paris Saint-Germain, who aren't necessarily the most popular side, Mbappe will always get a very good reception. Players might like just playing in that environment. Yeah, he's got a contract up next summer, and at the end of the day, it's either going to come down to a big fee this year, a short extension where it has a release clause involved in it that Real Madrid will then be told go and trigger it, or he moves on a free transfer to Real Madrid.
I think Armando Broja?
Armando Broja, so he's had a decent loan spell out in Holland, although I don't think anyone would say the complete finished article. Vitesse would like him back on loan. Interestingly, Brentford, if they didn't get promoted and lost Ivan Toney, were keen on bringing him in on loan, but they've been promoted now, and as a result of that, I think Chelsea will be reluctant to send him somewhere he's not going to get regular minutes. Again, I think he'll probably get a chance in pre-season, and if he impresses in pre-season, there's no reason he might not end up being third choice sort of striker. He does have a similar sort of build in terms of size and stature to Giroud. He's a lot faster than Giroud and a different kind of player to Giroud. But there's certainly, it's certainly not out of the possibility that Broja will get a chance. He's very well liked by the club, and he will sign a new deal very soon.
Lads, I'm going to give Shadow a minute to pose his last question. Then we're going to conclude after this because we've been going for an hour and 36 minutes. So, Shadow, go ahead, mate.
It wasn't a question as to answer the Mbappe thing about the owners have said that he will not go, he will not be sold, he's going to sign, and they're guilting him into saying he's in France, he loves France, he's French, and it's his mission to build up the French league as well. So that's what they're trying to play the angles with. With Broja, though, 30 appearances, 10 goals for Vitesse. That's not banging numbers, to be honest.
It's good for his age, though.
It's not bad for his age.
It's not banging numbers, but at the end of the day, we say that it's still more than any of our strikers managed in the Premier League.
Can I ask the last question then, as Shadow didn't? This is a very important.
You're pushing it.
No, this is a really important question, and it's probably going to be just a short one. Obviously, we all know that we are the champions of Europe, and I heard that the club was saying that they want to do some sort of parade. Do we know of any sort of dates for this parade yet? Has anything been communicated?
There has been something communicated, but I'm not going to publicly say the date at this moment in time of what I've been.
Okay, but there's definitely going to be one then. There's going to be one at some point. Good.
Yeah, the club will do one. I can say the club, from what I understand, want to try and do one incorporating the men's team and the women's team to recognise the fact that they won their domestic double and had an incredible season. Again, I would like to give them a shout out as well, and also the fact that the Champions League was won. But again, there are issues around social distancing at this moment in time that make it difficult to do it. It needs to be liaised with the police. And also Chelsea have a couple of have another cup final in theory in August that they may want to display the trophy of if they do win it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Listen,
thank you.
Rob, I can't thank you enough for coming on the stream today, mate. I mean, we've battered you with all these questions. And that's the best way to describe it. We've battered you both on the chat, on the panel, and you did a great job, mate. I mean, you didn't duck and dive any of the questions. You gave us some good answers. You gave us a lot of food for thought. I'm really, really pleased to have had you on the stream. And I would like to extend you an invitation to pop on anytime you want. We stream pretty much daily. So I'd love to have you back on the stream in the future.
What's his Twitter account?
It's in the. It should be in the description. And if it's not,
Okay.
I will add it on. I will add it on later on.
Okay, he's a top man.
Yeah, well done, Rob. We really appreciate it.
If you go, lads, if you go on Twitter, and follow me, you see my last tweet. It has Rob's socials on there. That's a good way to go out there.
I'm not following you, Rob, please.
I'll pop it in the private chat.
Yeah, pop it in a private chat, and I will also link it on the description at the end. Lads, thank you all for taking part. Rob, especially you, and definitely some food for thought. I'm going to give you the closing statement if you want to say anything to the guys in the stream.
I mean, the only thing I can say is thank you very much, everyone, for sort of your questions. I'm now off for a very long lie down in the darkened room with something very, very strong to drink.
You've earned it, mate. You've earned it. Oh, and also a big shout out to Julius for setting this up. Julius is a mutual friend of ours, and he set this up. So a big shout out to him. Respect, guys. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to give you a quick outro. If you enjoyed the intro, you'll enjoy the outro. Have a good one, lads. I'll see you all later.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
See you.